My name is Dwayne Amos, and this is a presentation on Andrew Logue Oldham as an artist manager. Uh, Oldham was born in London on January 29th, 1944. This was in the midst of World War II. His father was actually killed in World War II, so he was raised by his mother in England. In his teenage days, Oldham got his first taste of music, of the music business, working at London jazz clubs like the Flamingo and Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club. And he was just a teenager working there and getting to see some of the performers, and at the same time also seeing the managers of the clubs and some of the business aspects. Um, as he ventured into his early career, again, only being a teenager, he did spend some time working at public relations firms, but he ultimately decided to kind of go out on his own and start his own business. And so from 1962 to 63, he spent time scouting bands and other acts. And then in 1963, he began doing public relations work for the Beatles. And this would definitely prove to be the ultimate link that led to what would become one of Oldham's greatest discoveries. But this period in 62 to 63 was huge for him because he was going around to different clubs and pubs and concerts and scouting acts like Bob Dylan and bands that were just coming up. And as he was scouting and doing some freelance work, he began to build a name for himself, eventually enough to the point where he could um, earn enough clout to uh, do public relations work for the Beatles, and was eventually able to even land the Beatles a spot in Vogue. Um, and all of this culminated in what would be one of his greatest discoveries, and that is the Rolling Stones. Um, Oldham first saw the Rolling Stones on April 21st, 1963, at a club in the Richmond Station Hotel. And he basically said he knew immediately that this band not only had great potential, but that he felt like this was destiny. He's quoted as saying, "All my preparations, ambitions, and desires had just met their purpose. Everything I'd done up until now was preparation for this moment. I saw and heard what my life thus far had been for." So as you can see, it's pretty dramatic, but it was a big moment for him discovering this band. He made some arrangements, and at the age of just 19, 1 year later, he signed the Rolling Stones to a management contract. So the path, how did he manage the group and grow their talent and success? Well, first, he had them drop their piano player to only a part-time status. The piano player was older, and Oldham had this image of a youthful group. Then he got them to sign a record deal with EMI, and the deal was reportedly more than even the Beatles were getting. And he guided them to start releasing a number of cover songs, songs that other people had already recorded or other people had written, and so people might have already been somewhat familiar with these songs. But then the Rolling Stones added their own twist to them, and one of them was "I Want to Be Your Man." And then uh, Oldham learned to produce himself, and he helped the band start producing original albums. And this also helped him to control some of the recording costs because they would pay the recording costs up front, and then this way they could just license or lease the rights to the recordings to the record labels. Whereas a lot of other bands would have the record labels pay the recording costs, and the labels would then have more ownership of the music. Um, Ultimately, Oldham marketed this group as a young, kind of bad boys image, and the band rocketed to enormous success. He's quoted as saying that something along the lines of he wanted the band to be the type of group that your parents love to hate. He wanted them to have this rough, edgy type of feel to them because he knew that the youth were attracted to that. So my key takeaways from Oldham's management style and particularly his work with the Rolling Stones. One is that it's extremely important to scout new and untapped talent and to do it with in an organic way. You know, the way that he just went around to local places, clubs, and the music scene in his city, there's something to be said for that. You know, it wasn't something that was fabricated or necessarily planned out, but he was just scouting and looking for raw talent. And he eventually was able to find that. And then the next thing I would take away is this control of the recording process. And you know, if you control the recording process, you get greater leverage from the record labels. And I think that's really important, especially in today's climate with the 360 deals. And you know, the record label comes off, at least in the past, is that the artist really needed the label. Nowadays, with the availability and accessibility of recording equipment and things like that, you can get your own music done. It's the distribution and things where you need help. So, you know, if you can take care of what you can on your end, you can have a little more leverage when you go to the negotiation table. Uh, then that whole idea of tapping into all of an artist's talents. And I think this even comes back to that first point of doing that organic scouting and finding untapped talent like he did with the Rolling Stones, who wasn't even writing their own music. They were doing cover music, and he eventually got them to hone their writing skills and to start writing their own music. So finding that talent when it's raw and then helping it grow and bringing out those aspects of the talent that has not yet um, been tapped into. And finally, is knowing your image and the target market and sticking to that. He knew from the jump that he was looking for a band that had a young image. And so he stuck with that. You know, they had to get rid of the piano player and other things they did along the way, but he kept his eye on the ball. And it really worked because, you know, that teen and youthful market was certainly a huge part of the success of the Rolling Stones. So going forward, if I was managing a young Rolling Stones band in today's market, similar to Oldham, I would certainly start with the cover songs, but I would release them on YouTube. A lot of people do that these days, and you can take a song that's number one on the charts right now, and you release a cover on it, and people are already searching for that song, and then your cover comes up, and if it's anyway, you know, halfway decent or pretty good, you get a lot of hits on it, and you'll start to make a little noise. Then I would use social media to leverage the band's fan base. So when you're starting to get views, you're starting to get fans. Now you have a little bit of leverage when you go to the negotiation table, whether it be with a record label distribution or a concert, a venue or something like that. You know, we bring a fan base with us, and you can leverage that to perhaps get better rates or to get into a place where you otherwise might not be able to get into. And finally, I would galvanize other popular acts and put on a legendary concert or tour. I think when you have the amount of clout and just the stature of a band like the Rolling Stones, you know, you can then get other acts that are maybe not as popular, but that are very popular, and you can headline this show, and it will not only help rocket your own popularity and fame. But as you're bringing up those people around you, they then are lifting you up because you're helping them as well. So it's kind of like scratch my back, I scratch yours, but at the same time, you know, you're benefiting in both ways. So ultimately, I think I learned a lot from this project, and I think Oldham, you know, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now, and he definitely has gone down as one of the greatest artist managers in history. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from him and continue to improve on uh, in this next age of the music industry.